Welcome to this week's episode, and where we're doing a series of lessons for beginners about the fundamentals of art, and those being line, tone, shape, colour, texture and composition. And it's just to give you an idea of where to start when you start looking for things. So today, lesson 2, we're going to look at tone. Tone can also be called value, it can be called shade. It's basically how much light or shadow there is, whether there's a light or an absence of light. So how light or how dark something is. So you can do that in different ways. As we saw from the last episode in lesson 1, you can use it with hatching and cross-hatching in lines. So a very classic exercise is to have a series of squares along a strip, and you're going to have the middle section being the mid-tone, the light end being all the light, and the other end being the complete absence of light. So with hatching with an ink pen, that's going to be actually coloured in black, almost. There won't be any light showing through at all. So that's your darkest shade, this is your lightest shade. And the aim is to get from dark to light using cross hatching. So say in the middle you'd go for like a mid-tone. Where I've actually left a bit more of a gap in between those. And then from here we'll go a little bit darker, maybe with 3 directions, and here a little bit lighter by spacing them out a bit. Darker, 1 or 2 more going that way, because I don't want a big jump as we go down. And this one even lighter, and then darker. They're very similar, so I'll take that down one more time. And then this one very close together, like so. And this way, those lines getting further apart. So you can see just with lines and a pen, I can do tonal values from absolutely darkest to lightest, all the way. And all these can be used to describe values, different areas of shading and things like that, which I'll probably get onto when I go into shape. I might touch on shape a bit in a minute, but this is mostly tone with line. And speaking of tone with line, before I go on to this next section here, it's very difficult to actually get a line to change value very much with a pen. You can sort of get lighter and darker depending on how hard you press on. But if we start to look at pencils, this is a B pencil. It's a little bit softer than a HB. You can get them very soft. So this is a B. Then I've got a 2H and a 6B, and I'm just going to show you the difference. So we'll start with the B, and with this you can really do quite dark and quite light lines, so it means you can really change the value, the tone of the strokes that you're making. That's with a B pencil. With a 2H, you're actually starting with a harder, I call it a pencil lead, but it's not, it's like a graphite material. But you're actually starting with a harder material, so although you can get it to go from light to dark, can you see already that line is actually lighter than that one? So even your darkest tones with a 2H start a lot lighter. And then we go to 6B. And with this one, this is a lot softer material. The material through the centre is a lot softer. So you can see straight away, you can get quite pronounced tonal changes, almost as dark as an ink pen, just with the pencil. And when you're doing your shading, that dark area, you can actually get it very, very dark. And what I'm doing with this is I'm actually just going backwards and forwards with the same rhythm, but I'm actually lifting the pressure off the pencil as I'm bringing it up. So we've got 2H, a B and a 6B. So the range of pencil hardness, and therefore how dark you can get them, goes from 9B, 8B, 7B, 6B, 5B, 4B, 3B, 2B. Doesn't say 1B, it just says B. Then in the middle you have a HB, and then after the HB you have a H, 1H, and then 2H, 3H, 4H, 5H, 6H, 7H, 8H, and 9H. So 9B is going to be your softest, 9H is the hardest. And I always remember it because your 9H is the hardest and the 9B will go blunt easier. That's how I always started remembering the B's go blunt because they're softer. So I hope that helps as far as pencils go. And you can see that the reason I've shown you these lines is when you start to draw an object. I'm going to really quickly, I'm just going to draw this little carton. I just use it for putting glazes in. So let's just put that there. In fact, what I'll do, you won't be able to see it from there anyway. So I'm just going to put that there. So whilst I'm drawing the top edge of it, and this is just going to be a line drawing using tone. So I've gone back to line and tone mixed together. So the bit that comes closest to me, I'm going to do harder. And then as it goes round the back, I'm going to have it going softer. So it actually looks like it's receding away a little bit. And any areas that sort of disappear into the object, I'm just going to softly let them go away rather than a hard line. So hard to soft, hard to soft. And this area here. And then there's a line that goes here. So it starts soft here, darker because it's nearer to me, and then round there like that. And at the back, it's further away, so I'm going to do that softer. So that's just a line drawing. Not a brilliant one, I admit. But it gives you an idea of where things are in relation to the surface underneath just by the thickness of the line. Need to work on my shape, obviously. So the other thing you can do with pencil line is, if I wanted to do this and plan it out a little bit more, I could start by putting in some almost like mapping lines just to get the proportions right, because this one I wasn't quite happy with the proportions of the lines, but I'd committed to the lines. So here, very faintly, and I'm just touching the surface of the paper with the pencil. I'm just working out my areas for where I'm going to do my lines, and then once I've done that, I can then commit to the line, because I've done the planning out. I can be more committed with my line, knowing where it's going to go. Carrying on round here. And that way, you get more control over the shape that's coming out. And this is with a 2B pencil. So you can see the stronger the line that I want, the more defined the edge, the darker I've gone, and where it's closer to me. Further away, just a little bit lighter. Gives you some depth into your drawings without even shading, just on the tonal value of the line. When you start talking about tone and shape as far as three-dimensionals go well together well. So I'm going to leave that until we actually get to shape in the next lesson. What I want to do quickly is go back to this bar, and this is with a B pencil, the darkest and lightest, mid-tone. This is a really good exercise to get to know your materials. That's why I'm doing this in pencil as well, to show you. I'm going the wrong way, I'm going lighter instead of darker. When you first get a material, especially something like a new charcoal or Conte crayon or something like that, just having a go with it, doing something like this sends you in the right direction as to how you're going to manipulate it and use it. See, I've gone dark way too quickly there, I think, so that these three at the end are actually very similar. So let's see if we can get a bit darker on that. Yeah, cheated a bit there. And then lighter at this end. So my mid-tone that I chose is a little bit off. It was a little bit too dark, I think. There we go. So it gives you an idea of what your materials can do if you do something like that when you first get them. So next thing I'm going to look at I'm going to skip shape and I'm going to skip colour. I'm going to do more about those when we get to shape and we get to colour, and texture I'm going to skip as well. I'm going to do more about tone and texture when we get there. But very quickly I'm going to talk about tone and composition, because composition is such a huge area when we get there. I'm just going to do a bit of it first. So when you're composing a picture, when you look at the object, you may want to think about how you're going to use tone and contrast to actually make nearer objects stand out and further objects recede. So when objects are in the distance, I'm going to do just 2 squares. When objects are in the distance, you may want to not have such a hard edge between the background and the foreground and the object. So it's a little bit hazier, not as detailed. So this is where line comes in as well, that boundary edge between 2 objects or 2 surfaces. So that's a little bit further away. As it gets closer, have that change in tone a bit sharper. So I've actually used a very, very similar tone to that and that, but because this is sharper, a sharper line, using tone and line together, it appears closer. So in a composition, make sure you allow for things in the background being softer, things in the foreground being crisper. The other thing is, if you are doing, say, a very simple composition, I'm going to stick with the perspective composition because it's understood, and you have an object going from the ground to the sky, like so, you may want to let's put in a series of hills here, horizon. It's very simple, just to show you. Where the sky is, have the tone of it a bit darker, so the light from the sky is blocking out your view and is making it darker. Then as it comes down, it's the actual ground that's going to be darker than the building, and then you'll see more detail and things like that. So tone can also help you in a composition, and looking for light on dark areas and dark on light areas in composition can help important areas stand out. So darker near the sky, lighter in the background, a bit darker, and then more vivid. And it's not darker, it's not necessarily darker in the foreground, there is just more contrast. So you'll have lights and darks shown more, whereas out here it won't be truly dark and it won't be truly light. And then as it gets lighter overall, as it gets further away. So values of tone change in compositions, especially in landscapes, the further away you get. And then right at the front, at the front of your picture, that's where you'll get the most tonal contrast. Contrast being very, very dark and very, very light is high contrast. Two tones very close together is low contrast. So that's another way of creating depth using tone. One other thing I want to say about tone and composition is, say you're doing a portrait and they've got very dark hair here and a very light skin. So very dark hair, very light. So if you do a dark, something dark in the background here, it will allow you to push that light area forward. But as it comes round, have it getting lighter on this side, so that the hair, especially if it's a kind of hair you actually want to do some detail on, maybe it's got some beautiful curls coming out of it or something, a lighter area on that side will allow you to focus on that hair. So using tonal value in the background allows you to bring objects in the foreground forward. And if you have a dark background, try and have your main subject lighter. If you have a light background, you may want to have your main subject a bit darker, so that they stand out a bit. And when I say main object, I mean like the main focus. So if it was a composition of flowers, if it was very, very light, maybe have where you want the composition of the flowers to focus. Bring some stems and flowers into that area in a darker way. If it's dark in the background, then have those where you want the eye to focus to be the lightest. So here I wouldn't use a really, really dark vase, I'd have a light vase. But on this one, I might actually go for a dark vase, so that the focus is on the flowers. So if you've got a dark background, think about where you want the focus to be. If you want the focus on the flowers, lighten that area, and in a light background, if you want the focus on the flowers, darken that area. Just little ways of using value and tone in composition. Obviously there are other ways, but I'll do some more of that when we actually get to composition. So hopefully that's been useful, and we've got a bit more looking at tone as one of the fundamentals, tone being how light or dark something is. You can mess around with the materials. Obviously tone goes with colour as well. Tone goes with colour and it also goes with texture, but I am going to be touching on those when we get to the colour and texture sections. So the next area we're going to look at is shape. That's lesson 3, and there's nothing left today apart from questions and answers.
Questions and answers.
Right, this week's questions and answers, the question comes from Catherine. She's asking about what's the difference between cold pressed and hot pressed paper. Well, in the manufacturing side of things, cold pressed and hot pressed paper are made in the same way using a press. Hot press, it's hot, cold press, it's cold. That's the main difference in the manufacturing side of things. In the actual paper, as you can see by these two, a hot pressed and a cold pressed, and actually draw something on the hot pressed. This is with a B pencil. It's actually quite a smooth texture. And with a cold pressed, you can see there is more texture on the paper, even with the 2H pencil. This is called the tooth of the paper, and that's the main difference between hot pressed and cold pressed paper. So thank you for that question, Catherine, and hopefully that's answered it. The hot pressed paper is smoother and better for fine detail pencil work, and the cold pressed has got more texture, more tooth, and is good for where you want inks or watercolours to soak in, or if you want to use pastels or something like that needs a bit of tooth to the paper. Right, so that's the end of this week's video. Please subscribe and like the videos, pass them on if you think they'll be useful to anyone. And next week we'll be looking at shape. So thanks very much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.